Welcome, wherever you are listening from. Take a moment to settle in. Let your body soften into stillness and allow the pace of the modern world to gently fall away. You are safe here. The journey we're about to take requires no preparation, no passport, roads not paved nor marked, but carved into the earth by centuries of footsteps, hooves, and wooden wheels. Roads that became veins of culture and commerce. The Silk Road. And no packing, only the comfort of your blanket and a little curiosity about the lives that came before. Tonight, we travel far. Not just across time, but across the long, aching roads of Central Asia. It was not a single path, but a network, a web of life, stretching from the eastern gates of Cheyenne in China, across deserts, over mountains, into Persia, to the shores of the Mediterranean. Let your breathing fall into step with the quiet rhythm of a caravan plodding through dust. A route so rich with myth and memory, and yet so poor in comfort. Tonight's story is not one of glittering silks alone, but of exhaustion, danger, saltless meals, and the steady rhythm of human endurance. You will meet travelers and translators, wanderers and whispering winds. You will hear of cities that gleamed in the desert and mysteries left behind in sand and stone. So, close your eyes if you haven't already. The world slows now, begins to speak. Imagine it is just before dawn in the great expanse of the Taklamakan Desert, a place so vast and so dry that even the stars seem muted by dust. The air is thin, and there is a silence that doesn't invite peace, but caution. Even the wind seems to wait. You stir from sleep, if you can call it that. More a kind of half-conscious rest, cocooned in a woolen blanket that still couldn't quite keep the cold from gnawing at your bones during the night. You rise slowly, joints reluctant, muscles tight. There is already movement in the caravan. You are among the laborers, the keepers of animals, the fire tenders, the pack loaders, the night watchers. But it doesn't really matter. No one is spared from the discomfort. A low murmur of voices, the clinking of metal buckles, the groan of camels being loaded. You are a caravaner, one of dozens, maybe more. Flatbread, dry and tough, and a bitter tea brewed from withered herbs and scraps of camel dung. It is not appetizing, but it is warm. You chew slowly, savoring the routine, not the flavor. Conversations, if any, are quiet and functional. It settles in the folds of fabric into the corners of your mouth. You no longer bother brushing it off. Instead, you adapt. Your eyelashes are crusted from the grit. You carry it in skins, carefully tied to the saddles, shaded from direct sun. When you drink, you do so sparingly, not out of habit, but necessity. A full gulp might leave you short for the day. You learn to let the water sit on your tongue a moment longer than needed before swallowing. You won't see them on horseback, charging in the open. No, they know this terrain better than you. They wait in places where the dunes form natural traps or where narrow passes offer no escape. Sometimes they don't take everything, just a few mules, a bag of spices, a pouch of coins. Enough to leave you shaken, but alive. Your lips crack. The skin of your hands has gone leathery. But still, you walk, because this is what the journey demands. Your job is not glorious. You are neither the merchant whose goods are worth fortunes, nor the guards who carry swords and move with pride. The desert does not play favorites. You glance toward your camel. It's already up, shaking its shaggy coat. The Bactrian camel is perfectly suited to this climate. 2 humps for fat storage, long eyelashes to fend off sand, wide padded feet for the loose terrain, rooms with stone floors and cool water, women who wear perfume, musicians who play instruments you've never seen, merchants who speak in half a dozen languages and sip tea laced with rose petals and cinnamon. But they are temperamental creatures, and yours greets you with a resentful grunt. You mutter softly, patting its side, already brushing the fine dust from its bridle. The warmth of day has long vanished, replaced by a chill that creeps into the marrow. You huddle close to the fire, but fuel is scarce. Dried dung, scraps of brush, leftover fibers, everything is burned. The fire is weak, but it dances enough to make you feel human. Breakfast is as it always is. You lie on a mat so thin it might as well be the bare ground. Others by something worse, something that blooms behind the eyes, that makes the breath labored, that leaves the body stiff before dawn. There are no doctors here, only old remedies passed between hands. Dried roots, whispered prayers, heated stones placed on the chest. Sometimes they help, often they do not. You listen to the sounds of the night, the occasional grunt of a camel, the soft snore of the man beside you, a cough, the wind. The caravan must move before the sun fully rises. The sand is deeper than before. Some of your supplies are gone. A tent is missing. A man named Harun hasn't returned. Someone says he tried to tie down a flap in the middle of the gale. A sip of fermented mare's milk, if you're lucky. Some caravans carry pickled vegetables or hard cheese from the steppes. The flavors are strong and often unwelcome, but you eat them anyway. That most precious of colors, the flickering of date palms in the distance, pools of water, shallow but enough. The water is cool. It stings your skin in the best way. You refill your flasks. Dates blur. The moon shifts, but you do not mark it. You begin to measure time in landmarks: crooked rock, a ruined tower, the remains of a temple half buried in the sand. You pass others on the route, some going east, others west. They nod. Sometimes they speak. Often they do not. You barter with locals, people who know the rhythm of the desert even better than you. They sell salt, dried figs, fish pulled from strange little ponds that seem impossible in a place like this. Your body cannot afford preference. No one volunteers to look for him. You don't even say the word bandit aloud, as if naming them would invite their presence. A corner of the world where you know the smell of the earth, where your bed is always in the same place, where your food tastes like memory. But in the morning, you wake up in the same gray world of sand and repetition, because when it does, the heat becomes unbearable. You trudge through the sand, each step slow and deliberate. There is no rush. The desert does not reward haste. The caravan moves in single file, snaking through an invisible path that only the lead guide understands. The winds howl with a force that steals your voice, your sense of direction, and your sanity. The wind against canvas, it becomes a lullaby in a way. It brings silk to the west and glass to the east. It carries tea, jade, lapis, and song. It is not one road, but many, 100 interwoven veins of ambition and need. Repetitive, predictable. The rhythm of survival. You tie a cloth over your face and pull your hood tight. You press into the camel, its body a meager shield, but there's comfort in the repetition. You unpack the same pot. You gather the same fire scraps. You chew the same bread, and as night descends, you curl beneath your blanket, listening to the wind sweep across the dunes. But even so, you cannot escape the feeling that the storm is peeling away layers of you, your skin, your resolve, your very place in the world. There are no signs, no markers, just a landscape of sameness-less endless dunes, whispering winds, and the occasional dry riverbed where scrub brush grows like forgotten threads. The sand is fine, almost like powder, when with every gust of wind, it finds its way into your clothing, your shoes, your food, your ears. You blink slowly. Water is rationed carefully. Each person is allowed just enough. There are dangers everywhere. Some are known, some you only sense. Bandits are a constant fear, but they are rarely obvious. Other times, entire caravans vanish. The fear grows not from what is seen, but from what is whispered around the fire after dark. Then there are the storms. Dust storms come suddenly. Sometimes they appear like a wall of fog on the horizon. Other times, they rise out of nowhere. Afterward, the silence is not peaceful. It is hollow, the kind that follows trauma. This is the rhythm of caravan life. Tedium, danger, more tedium. You think often about the cities. Cities like Kashgar, Samarkand, Bukhara. Places spoken of with reverence. Places with gardens and fountains. But you are not there. You are here and here. It is only survival. At night, you do not sleep deeply. The air is cold, sharply so. You wrap yourself in layers. Your cloak smells of smoke and animal sweat. Always the wind. Sometimes you dream of home. Not of comfort, necessarily, but of familiarity. Illness travels easily along these routes. You've seen men taken down by a simple fever. But there is no time for mourning. The caravan must move, and so you press forward. Because your job is not to dwell. It is to walk, to carry, to endure. There is a certain meditative quality to the monotony. Step after step, the creak of wooden wheels, the soft pad of hooves. Even the food, for all its blandness, has its ritual. You chew slowly, a bit of dried mutton. When you reach an oasis, everything changes for a moment. Green, but again, you do not linger. The desert does not wait. As the days turn to weeks, you begin to lose your sense of time. The faces change, but the rhythm never does. And eventually, you forget what it felt like to be clean, or full, or safe. And still, you walk. Because this road, for all its misery, is a lifeline. It binds kingdoms together. It moves ideas and faiths and stories, and you are a part of it. As the sun sets once more, you prepare camp. Your hands are cracked. Your back is sore. Tomorrow, you will do it all again and again and again, until finally, one day, a gate will rise on the horizon. A city wall, a real bed, a bowl of something spiced. But not today. Today, you sleep beneath the stars, and the road stretches endlessly before you. India welcomed Zhuangzang like a long-lost brother. Its heat clung to the air differently than the cold. Plains of Central Asia. The scents were unfamiliar spices drifting from street-side kitchens. Sandalwood smoke curling from temple altars. The damp stone of old shrines still cool from the shade. At first, he did not understand every word. He listened more than he spoke. But gradually, the rhythms of India's languages, customs, and sacred texts began to settle into him like sediment in a river. They layered and deepened. He walked not only across landscapes, but across ideas. At Nalanda, he found his sanctuary. Stone buildings with carved archways, courtyards full of saffron-robed monks in discussion, their voices steady and curious. Trees arched overhead, offering pockets of soft shade. Wind moved slowly through the compound, and with it, the low murmur of wisdom being passed from one generation to the next. Picture it. Scrolls inked in scripts Xuanzang had never seen before, but would soon master. He ate, sitting cross-legged with others, sharing silence or slow conversation about the nature of suffering, the illusion of the self, or the cycle of rebirth. He studied the Mahayana and Theravada schools, absorbed the Madhyamaka and Yagpi Kriya philosophies. He debated under banyan trees, knelt during sunrise rituals, and copied sutras by lamplight. The smell of burning oil, sweet and thick. To Rajir, where the Buddha once gave sermons from rocky hillsides. To Lumbini, where the very idea of Buddhism was first born with the cries of a newborn prince beneath blooming trees. A massive university monastery, vast and alive. There were libraries, entire buildings lined wall to wall with palm leaf manuscripts. His days were quiet but full. The way people dressed, the price of grains in local markets, the customs of courtship, the layout of temples. By the time he prepared to leave, he had gathered. He observed with the care of a scholar, but with the soul of a pilgrim. The kind of sound that echoed long after it faded. He noted the variety of dialects spoken in different regions, how different sects of monks shaved their heads or arranged their robes. Even the animals' elephants used for ceremony, deer in temple gardens. Monkeys, watching from palace rooftops, made their way into his records. He would rise, wash with cool water from stone basins, and dress in robes worn soft by time. A bell would ring at dawn low and resonant. It was not urgent, just steady. Meals were simple often, rice and lentils, sometimes spiced with cumin or ginger. What Xuanzang sought was not just doctrine. He wanted understanding. He wanted the roots of the teachings, not just their petals. And so he continued to travel. To Varanasi, where the Ganges shimmered with firelight from evening prayers. Everywhere he went, he wrote. He crossed the mountains again, the snows receding as spring unfurled across the ranges. He worked with teams of scribes and scholars, reading aloud the Sanskrit lines, then carefully recasting them into Chinese, preserving meaning, rhythm, and nuance. He paused in the valleys to rest his manuscripts stored in lacquered boxes, protected from the elements by layers of cloth and care. He invented new Chinese characters to represent Buddhist ideas that had no direct equivalent. His translations were so careful, so resonant, that many are still used today. He explained concepts that Chinese audiences had never encountered. He brought India into China, and not just about beliefs. That peace required effort, and that even one man walking alone could shape the spiritual landscape of half the world. He described rivers and cities, the color of soil. He described how Indian kings were chosen, how temples were funded, how laws were passed down. Through Xuanzang, China would come to know India, not as rumor, but as reality. He returned as a guest of the Emperor Honored Pilgrim. Of the way a teaching changes when you sit beneath the same tree where it was first spoken, breathe the same air, hear the same bell. Centuries later, poets and playwrights would turn his pilgrimage into myth. The real scrolls became magical ones. The journey became enchanted. The scholar became a hero, accompanied by beasts and spirits. Khat marveled at the breadth of his journey. They listened to his stories of Indian dynasties, of temples that housed thousands, of debates that lasted weeks. He stayed in the subcontinent for nearly 2 decades. 657 Buddhist texts, sacred relics from key pilgrimage sites, images of the Buddha, cast in bronze and carved in sandalwood, and knowledge, so much knowledge that it would take him a lifetime to share. The return journey was carefully arranged. This time, he did not travel in secrecy or solitude. Kings offered escorts. Monks and diplomats joined his party. As he passed through Samarkand and back into China, word of his return spread quickly. When he entered Chang'an once more, he did not do so as a fugitive monk. But Xuanzang wanted no titles. He asked instead for one thing: a quiet place to translate. The emperor granted it. In a serene monastery at the edge of the city, Xuanzang began the immense task of translating the mountain of scriptures he had brought home. This was no simple substitution of words. It was a careful dance between 2 languages, between 2 worldviews, and he did so with a calm that seemed to echo his long walk through the desert all those years ago. He translated works like the Heart Sutra and the Prajnaparamita, texts that would become cornerstones of East Asian Buddhism for centuries to come. But Xuanzang's contribution wasn't just linguistic. He embodied the idea that truth was worth sacrifice, that understanding came not from hearsay, but from experience. In his final years, he continued to teach. He continued to reflect. He spoke not of the dangers he had faced, nor of the discomfort. He spoke, instead of clarity, of insight. He died quietly in the year 664, surrounded by students. A simple ending for an extraordinary journey. And though time passed, the story of Xuanzang did not fade. But here, in the soft hush of this moment, we remember the truth. He walked alone across the spine of Asia for knowledge, not for glory, Ko, for clarity, not for power, for peace, not for praise. And, in walking, he lit the path for others. So now, as your mind begins to quiet again, let the image of Xuanzang remain, not in grandeur, but in stillness. A single figure, walking slowly beneath the desert sky, robes fluttering gently in the wind. A satchel of texts at his side, and in his heart, the quiet certainty of purpose. The first of these mummies was found not by scientists, but by local herders. The desert wind, ever patient, had swept away layers of sand, exposing a glimpse of cloth woven in a twill pattern, still vivid with red and blue dyes. Beneath it, a face, peaceful, still, framed in strands of pale hair that fluttered in the wind like faded silk ribbons. More would follow. In the 1980s and 1990s, teams of Chinese and international archaeologists began exploring the region in earnest. What they found defied every expectation. More than 200 mummies, some curled gently in fetal positions. Others laid out on wood-slatted beds, merged from the sands of the Tarim Basin. And each one deepened the enigma. Take, for example, the so-called beauty of Lulan. She was found near the edges of a long-lost salt lake, in a grave that had remained undisturbed for over 3,800 years. Her skin, though leathery, retained its shape. Her eyelashes were still visible. She wore a robe of woven wool, soft-looking even now, and shoes made of carefully stitched leather. Her hair was reddish-brown, and her face looked as if it might speak, and yet she had never spoken a word anyone remembered. Around them, archaeologists uncovered clues, grains of wheat and millet, wooden masks with serene expressions, felt hats shaped almost like wizard caps, and cloths woven in patterns remarkably similar to those found in Bronze Age Europe, but with peoples from Western Eurasia regions corresponding to modern-day Iran, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe. Some of the bodies were wrapped in wool and cowhide, placed inside wooden coffins shaped like boats. This suggested that long before the Silk Road had even officially opened, people were already moving, already mixing, already trading, marrying, migrating. Shoes that bore resemblance to those worn by ancient Siberian tribes. Tools fashioned from stone and bone. Even a stringed instrument resembling a primitive harp. Mummified infants cradled beside their mothers. Dolls made from bundled cloth and twigs. And jars containing what may have been offerings, grains, milk, cheese. Who was she? And what culture had she belonged to? The graves revealed more than just bodies. Soft, crumbly, and rich in proteins that suggested a complex method of fermentation. Evidence that these people not only traveled and farmed, but also understood food science in a way. The mystery deepened with each find. Genetic analysis would later reveal that many of the mummies shared ancestry not with Han Chinese or other East Asian populations. The weaves were tight, the dyes vivid indigo, madder, red, and muted yellows. These were not crude wrappings. In later centuries, Carian texts were found written in ancient manuscripts along the Silk Road using an Indian-derived script, but preserving a language that had ties to both Europe and Central Asia. They were tailored garments, shaped to the body, sewn with precision. The desert, which once seemed so empty, had never been silent. And yet, the origins of the Tarim people remain puzzling. Because while their genes pointed westward, their customs did not follow a single known path. New populations migrate into the region you knew Han. Empires rise and fall. Trade routes shift. Languages shift. Languages die. Their burial practices were unique. At one site, called Shawei, Little River, archaeologists found hundreds of graves, many marked by long, vertical wooden poles rising from the sand like silent sentinels. You could trace the ridges. You could imagine them grasping a tool, holding a cup, brushing dust from their eyes. These boat coffins were buried in San No River in sight, their arms crossed, their knees drawn up, as if they were dreaming, as if the desert had merely paused them, myth thought. Perhaps the boats were symbolic, a journey to the afterlife, or a memory of another place where water once flowed freely. Inside, the graves were bizarre artifacts, carved wooden phalluses and vulvas thought to be fertility symbols. Yes, geez. But even without fanfare, the Tarim mummies continue to quietly shape our understanding of the ancient world. Some of the earliest known cheese in human history was found here, preserved in the arid climate. Their textiles, too, fascinated scholars, but reverence. Some were tartan-like, with plaid patterns that seemed oddly familiar to researchers from Scotland. What emerges is not the image of primitive nomads, but of a sophisticated, settled people. People who spoke languages now lost to time. Some scholars believe these early inhabitants may have spoken Tocharian, an extinct branch of the Indo-European language family. And yet, the mummies predate those writings by 1,000 years or more. So, the question remains, were these the ancestors of the Tocharians, or a separate culture altogether lost to wind and silence? Even their disappearance is a mystery. There is no single moment where they vanish. Instead, over centuries, their presence fades, but the sand remembers. In some graves, researchers found bodies so well preserved that their fingerprints were still visible. Some of the mummies were buried with felt hats and woolen cloaks, their faces covered by masks shaped like leaves or flowers. To walk among their resting places today is to step into a story that has no ending, only whispers. only fragments. The Chinese government has kept some of the most significant discoveries under limited access, perhaps wary of how questions of ancient migration might stir political narratives. They remind us that civilization did not begin neatly, that culture was not confined by mountains or deserts, that people, real people, were walking, trading, falling in love, dying, and being buried in silence, long before anyone had drawn a map. And so, as we close this segment, imagine the basin once more. The sand stretches to the horizon, quiet and golden in the late light. A breeze stirs gently. You crouch beside a grave, not out of morbid curiosity. Inside lies a person, not a puzzle, but a person, wrapped in soft wool, still wearing shoes, hair fanned out around a face, as if asleep. And though the desert offers no answers, it offers stillness. Let that stillness settle into you now. The peace of a land that has seen everything and yet says nothing. Sleep, too, comes softly in the sand. Step softly now, as if your sandals touch not stone, but the pages of a forgotten manuscript. The streets of Bukhara in the medieval era were narrow and cool, laid out like veins through the body of the city. Tall walls of sun-baked brick kept the heat at bay, while wooden lattice screens filtered the sunlight into patterns on the ground. Cypress trees stood watch over inner courtyards, and at midday you could hear the faint splash of water from fountains hidden behind clay walls. Bukhara was not just a city, it was an idea, a threshold between east and west, where goods passed from hand to hand. And so did poems, philosophies, and rumors. The merchant elite of Bukhara were not men of brute wealth alone. They were men of letters, of caution, of calculation. On their heads turbans, wound in the style of the times, folded to show modesty but signal status. Their homes were quiet inside, arranged around central gardens where grapes climbed trellises and pomegranates ripened in late autumn. They wore long robes dyed in indigo and crimson with belts of soft leather from Baghdad or Kashmir. In these homes, business was not rushed. It was performed over sherbet, poured cool from clay jugs, and served in shallow cups. Only after such pleasantries did gold and silk come to the table. Discussions began slowly, with questions about family, about weather, about the health of horses. You might picture wealth as loud gilded and gaudy, but in Bukhara, wealth whispered. It showed itself in the thickness of a carpet, in the number of books on a shelf. Inside, students from Persia, Arabia, and beyond studied law, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. In the quality of the ink in a merchant's account book, Bukhara was neutral ground. Its merchants dealt with the Abbasid Caliphate and the Tang dynasty with nomadic steppe lords and wealthy Indian traders. In its markets, you could hear 10 languages before breakfast. Books were everywhere. The scholars of Bukhara were famed across the Islamic world. Madrasas, theological schools lined the city center, their facades tiled in geometric patterns of deep blue and white. But deals were rarely concluded in haste. A single transaction might stretch across several cups of tea and 3 days of negotiation. Here, one could hear the slow recitation of ancient texts in Arabic and Persian, memorized verse by verse. The city prized memory. It prized speech. A scholar's words were as valuable as a merchant's wares, perhaps more. Among these scholars walked diplomats, messengers from other courts, speaking in veiled tones, negotiating with a glance as much as with words. The trade halls, called tims or caravanserais, were arranged by specialty. After a long journey through the desert, the experience of simply sitting in a tiled chamber, watching steam curl upward into lamplight, could feel like a kind of rebirth. In one hall, you would find silk piled like water, colors so vivid they seemed to glow. In another, spices, cardamom, clove, cinnamon, saffronol, stored in heavy sacks tied with twine. There were entire arcades devoted to gems and dyes, others to leather goods, parchment, tools, and glass. Their descendants, though fewer, still walked the city's streets. Their traditions echoed in festivals and family recipes. Gold changed hands silently, often weighed on bronze scales set into the counters of the stalls. But the tide was unstoppable. The city fell. Temples burned. Libraries scattered. The old Zoroastrian temples were replaced, but their fire worship ceremonies lived on in metaphor and memory. Bukhara was patient, and it taught patience to those who passed through. Those who stayed often did so for the winter. The city's bathhouses offered warm stone floors and steam perfumed with eucalyptus and thyme. And yet, even luxury was not without risk. For Bukhara was not free from the winds of conquest. It stood at the crossroads of empires, Sogdian, Persian, Arab, Mongol. Each left its mark. Then, perhaps, you would step into a mosque at sunset, its walls cool to the touch, its arches casting long shadows in the amber light, some peacefully, others violently. The Sogdians, ancient traders who once ruled the region, had laid much of the commercial groundwork centuries before. The Arab conquests of the 8th century brought Islam to Bukhara, reshaping its religious and educational institutions. And then there were the Mongols. When Genghis Khan's armies approached in the 13th century, Bukhara prepared. Its walls were high, its people defiant. But Bukhara endured. It always had. In time, it would rebuild quietly. quietly. With mortar and memory, the bathhouses reopened. The madrasas taught again. The silk merchants unfurled their fabrics once more. Even in conquest, Bukhara absorbed. It changed hands, but not heart. And so, the city remained what it had always been, an anchor for travelers, a haven for the weary, a place where knowledge was as precious as coin. If you had arrived in Bukhara in the 10th or 12th century as a caravaner, newly freed from the trials of the road, you might have first wandered the domed trading halls, their ceilings echoing with footsteps. You might be invited into a home forward melon slices so sweet they made you blink, and bread as soft as the memory of home. And as night fell, you'd walk the streets slowly, not for fear, but for the pleasure of the evening breeze. You'd pass tiled fountains, lit by flickering oil lamps, and smell the mingling aromas of roasted lamb, mint, and rosewater. You might feel, in that moment, that the road had finally ended, that the world had grown still, and perhaps, just perhaps, you would sleep. And now, the road quiets. Our journey, once long and winding, slows to a soft stillness. You've walked far, tonight across vast deserts and forgotten cities, past windswept graves and inn-stained manuscripts, through the echo of camel bells and the murmur of ancient prayers. Let the rhythm of it all linger just a moment longer. Remember the feel of sand beneath your feet, shifting with each step like water frozen in time. The way dust clung to your robes, how the sun traced its golden fingers across the curve of your camel's back. A man whose journey was not measured in miles, but in meaning. You watched him carry the weight of wisdom, not for pride, but for peace. And you felt, perhaps, a little quieter just by walking beside him. Ancient faces with braided hair resting beneath centuries of sand. You glimpsed lives lost, not to war, but to time. And though their names were never known, their presence asked a gentle question. Their world was simple and yet full of purpose, of pattern, of patient suffering and quiet resolve. Then you followed a lone figure's Ranzanga cross the backbone of Asia. You heard the wind in the Gobi, the chants in Nalanda, the soft scratch of a brush on parchment. From there, you turned to a silence deeper than desert wind. The Tarim Basin whispered secrets to you not in shouts, but in faces. Who walked here before us? You watched a merchant smile without showing his teeth, a poet scribble in a corner, a scholar lift his gaze to the stars. You saw that the Silk Road was not just hardship, but home. What stories lay beneath our own? And then you wandered Bukhara's shaded streets. You touched tile, cool to the hand. You tasted bread, warm from the oven, not to a caravan or city. That somewhere along the weary miles, beauty had made its dwelling. And now, you have returned, not to a specific place, but to the quiet center of your own stillness, determined, curious, and, in some small way, just like you. Let it settle now, like desert dust after a storm. Let your breath come slower. Let your hands unclench. There is nothing more to carry, no more to walk, only to rest. The people of the Silk Road are long gone, but they have left their footprints beneath stories, beneath your eyelids as they begin to close. They were not heroes in the way legends often promise. They were simply people, tired. They moved forward, one step at a time, through difficulty, through distance, toward something they may never have fully seen, but believed in nonetheless. A destination, a purpose, a place to finally pause. And so, tonight, you too may pause. Let the world fall away. Let the sand hush its whispering. Let the caravan bells grow quiet in the wind. Let the stars shine overhead, ancient and indifferent. Let the road ... end, because here, in this quiet moment, you are not walking anymore. You are still. You are still. You are home. And the Silk Road vast, winding, and worn can wait until morning. Sleep well.